In the great hall of the Justice League, there are assembled the world's 4 greatest heroes, created from the cosmic legends of the universe. Their mission, to fight injustice, to right that which is wrong, and to serve all mankind.
We're back!
Not a lot of hits this week, but we have one more in the pocket, and that is Walt Simonson's Ragnarok. Petey, take it away.
Actually, Ragnarok had a little bit of a break. He did an 8-issue bi-monthly run, and by 8 issue, he took a break with a cliffhanger, where Thor, who's still alive, almost it seems like he gets attacked by the person who has been helping him, sort of his adversary / helper. So we come into this issue, and we see Thor getting stabbed, and we see a lot of elements of the character that were hinted in the myth and in Simonson's comic book, but we just get to see it played out, and we get even more mythic Thor with this sort of new look, and and just Simonson having fun with the character, where the dialogue is really sharp. You can tell he's having fun. You can tell he knows all of the myths, the Norse myths, and he can just play with it as he did with Thor in the Marvel Universe. So I have nothing really bad to say besides just wanting more of it. And it's just a lot. It's a very fun book.
I think I read issue 1, and I haven't picked up another issue since you recommended it for this week. So I'm just getting it. I'm getting this now. But I have to say I really enjoyed it. I mean, I had a lot of questions, of course. I'm like, why does Thor look like a walking skeleton, and what's going on here? But those questions didn't keep me from getting into the story and actually enjoying it. But again, it went to characterization. This read like a story about Thor. It was recognizable either from reading Walt Simonson's earlier run or having some familiarity with the stories of Thor with the prose or the Poetic Edda, which I've also read, or even if you're familiar with the films to a certain extent, well, maybe not the films, but this comes across as a character. Okay, this is Thor. I don't know exactly what's happened or where he's in, but then I start thinking, yeah, I remember Frog Thor, and he had some other stuff going on with the Destroyers. Okay, yeah, maybe he's playing around with that too a little bit. And the other thing that also works for me is that if you're coming into this story and you see Walt Simonson and it's Thor, more than likely you have some familiarity with his run. That's probably one of the draws into it. I mean, come on, it says Ragnarok, it says Walt Simonson. You'll probably expect to see Thor in there. But I'm reading through it and I was like, yeah, he made very good use of some of the the mythology of his goats, Tooth Gnasher and Tooth Grinder, him being able to kill them, resurrect them, and then at the same point where he's like, "Can you resurrect this guy?" He's like, "No, sorry, I can't. It has to be under the enchantment of the hammer." I was like, "Good, very good." So you keep it from becoming this Duet Machina thing where I can just bring anybody back, at the end of the day. I was like, "All right, fine." And still with the humor, we get to that last panel. And we see, he buries the fox, and by the end we see, okay, the fox is like, what the hell? Who put me in this hole? So he's able to still do those things well. It was very enjoyable. Story-wise, I definitely wanted to see more, and I thought it was a very good test because I read the first issue, and I didn't dislike it. I just never got around to the second issue because of the publishing schedule. I just wasn't able to keep up with it because I didn't know when it was coming out. But then I come in issue 9, and to be honest, even though I've missed, 8 other, I've missed about 7 other issues, I didn't feel it took away from me enjoying this one. And yeah, I would want to see what happens later on. The only drawback is that because of the publishing schedule, this is something I would probably wait for in a trade paperback, along that line. And that's a hard one because I think comic books, especially if you want to release a trade, release a trade. If you're going to release it monthly, release it monthly. But don't do this whole thing where it gets to the point where, like, you know what, I'll just wait for the trade. Because, I mean, now, yeah, I can wait. I've trained myself where I can wait, 6 months, a year, and I'll catch up with this later. And some of these things I think are good enough where it should be digested monthly with that frequency. That's the only problem I would have with it. Because I'm reading this now, I was like, hey, this is pretty good. Why didn't I keep up with this? And it was the publishing schedule. I mean, I can't put it all on the publishing schedule. If I really wanted to get it, I would have done it. But the greater ease for me getting it the more likely I'm going to read it. But yeah, he hits all the strides. He hits all the strides. The art and reading his art. I mean, rather, yeah, it's like reading. Looking at his art is almost like reading one of these Nordic runes. He really does a good job with this. This is really his wheelhouse when it comes to Thor. You know, definitely with the Nordic, you know, with the Norse and the Nordic mythology. He just does a very good job with it. I'm surprised that he has still so much depth for, you know, Thor and these particular stories, having done what he's done with Thor already. Really surprised.
I guess in the history of comics, outside of Image Comics, the stuff that's been like 6 times a year has been like killed, you know, almost stopped books, like the X-Men. The X-Men Cochrum's book was 6 times a year, and they were near canceling it to, you know, before they got Byrne on there, that was the purpose of them, just to make it so it could go monthly. They didn't know it was going to become a huge monster. But that and the break that can get people lose the schedule, where it's not like the Image Comics where it's just like they're promoting and saying, if you miss out on this, you miss out on this, you're gonna be out the loop. Which is, you know, no one, Simonson would never sell that way, sort of guilt the fans into buying it and saying, oh, we're growing roses here, we're taking time off to make it better. You know, he knows he's one of our senior artists and writers, and he's taking his time. So, you know, I'll follow whatever, but I can definitely understand if, you know, people want to wait for the trade. And IDW is good for re-releasing it in various forms, doing trades, extra large ones.
Yeah, extra large cost. Large.
I mean, that's the thing. I think they solicit to the bookstores in ways that almost gotten Marvel to sort of do the same, where it's like, oh, they for other things like they've done. Simonson's already has a nice. For the first 8 issues, they have a nice volume. For the first 8 issues of Ragnarok, they have a portfolio for it. You know, they just sort of, I mean, with the power of being able to reprint at a lesser price, you know, they put out a lot of stuff. You know, there's still a slow burn in this sort of story where it's slowly developing. He's not giving us everything at once. He's not trying to pile it in there. And as one of the guys that gave us the goods in many forms, as far as Thor, X-Men, Fantastic Four, Orion, I said, I'll just sit here and wait. I'm just taking it in, and I just enjoy this book, and I like it a lot. So that's all I've got to say.
Yeah. The other thing I also enjoyed is that I'm a big fan of Thor, and he has. If you've been following canon Thor with Marvel, these guys have decided the best thing we can do for Thor is to totally remove him from his book, slap Jane Foster in, and make you guys unhappy for as long as we can until sales dip to the point, okay, we have to bring him back or the new movie comes out. One of those three things. So reading this, I was like, yeah, it's not impossible to tell good Thor stories. I mean, Fraction did Ages of Thunder. And when I read this, I was like, okay, fine. This is some really good stuff right over here. I think the biggest problem they've always had is telling the modern stories with Thor. But then no, because Dan Jurgens was able to do that. They have a problem, with Thor, you have two things you can do. You can do the modern cosmic stuff with him, and you can also do the mythological things as well. So that opens up a whole host of things to do. So when you come in, I'm saying, okay, we get rid of Thor, so we can put Jane Foster in. I always ask, well, what was the point in that? And who's the audience for this? But hey, it's selling. And even when I read the stories, I was like, these stories aren't really, they're not bad, not good, but I don't want to read this. I want to read Thor, and I don't want to see something of Thor, okay, where they're going to break him down to build him back up. He's come on, this is Thor. I don't really need to see that sort of story. I need to see Thor on some epic, I don't mind seeing him on some epic quest, some big journey, but the whole character deconstruction with a god, it's a little bit much for me. You want to do that with Peter Parker, you want to do that with one of the human characters, okay. But with a god, even these guys have to go through this nonsense? Again, they don't have any commitment to the character, and they have very little commitment to a story for that character, and they go hand in hand with it. But Ragnarok, yeah, this just feels like a continuation of yet another Thor story. And that's really the approach that I would have to take with it if I was there. Thor is this character where you have all of these mythological tales, and this is almost like an untold tale of Thor. We know he'll get it right, and he'll set everything right, and you can just enjoy the ride for it. But the commitment to story and character is definitely there, and I did appreciate that for this.
Well, that's the other thing that's I think Simonson did for Thor. Besides doing great stories and even doing solid characterization, he brought in Thor's humor, which and not having it so it would be like Thor would have moments with what's that Beta Ray Bill, or have the moments with the humans where he would say something that was slightly humorous and saying this guy isn't, he likes humans, he likes being around them, he likes interacting with them, and he's a god, but he has moments of humor. And you can see it, I think, for the 2 seconds which he drew for was it Mark Wade when he did the what's it, Indestructible Hulk, and Thor, they meet, and Thor is smiling, and this person who that's the thing that Kirby had before he had the Don Blake, was that Thor would just go out, have adventures, and take stuff out. He just he's having the most fun on the planet. So that's the thing you get in this book, where it's the character's going through this transformation, and he's lost all of his family, but he still has a little bit of the Thor humor that was in in the Simonson run.
Yeah, and this is literally the end of the world, and they're still able to inject humor here, which is again the show of a really good writer, that you don't have to sacrifice everything in terms of putting together a more serious or a darker story and say, well, no, they can't laugh, we can't chuckle at certain things, there's no humor to be had. No, there's still those things that you can do, and it makes for a broader, richer story at the end of the day. So hey, let's rate this one.
I said, out of 5, I'm going to say 3. They're not saying negative anything about it. I enjoyed it, but it's just a long part of a story. So I'm going to go 3.
I'm tempted to go 5, but I'm going to give it a 4. And the only caveat I have has nothing to do with the story, just the publishing schedule. If you can give me if I can get this story and get my hands on it with greater frequency, no problem. But to be honest, as much as I would rather read this than what's going on with Thor, if I can't get my hands on it with frequency, then I'm just going to wait for the trade. But that's no slight against the story or the art.
I guess that's it. We finally gave you a one that scored. We don't hate everything, guys. We do like some things.
And we will keep up with the scoring. Thanks for that suggestion. For those of you that great listener who suggested it, we do appreciate all your comments, everything that comes in with it, and we will be back real soon with some more comics to review, and hopefully we like them. Hopefully.
But we want to be current, and being current means we're gonna trash your favorite book. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, if it's bad, it's bad. But don't worry, you're tough. You'll be able to handle it.
It's just a different viewpoint.